Hey friends, welcome back. This is the AI Empowered series, the complete guide to AI in your personal and professional lives. Today, I want to talk about a really key piece in your AI journey, and that's managing your AI output. So, this is really all about quality control on what it is that AI is giving you as you apply it into your life and your work. So I just want to talk about sort of going from a mediocre raw output to that professional or high quality grade that you're looking for. This quality control system that I've built really transforms the way you audit your AI output so that you're not making mistakes I see a lot of people making with AI. It creates situations that can be embarrassing, or people just think, oh, that was AI. And that's just plain wrong. So you really don't want to make these mistakes as you're working with AI because it can have pretty serious impact on your reputation. I've developed this system that really enhances your quality by understanding where things are off and getting them to where they need to be. So developing those standards. By the end of the video, you'll really be able to master this comprehensive quality control system within AI. And it'll ensure that the output meets standards of accuracy, relevance, and credibility before it reaches, the people in your lives or important stakeholders. So we've gone a lot into context in AI, and that's a core effort in making sure it's giving you relevant, accurate information based on the context. But I want to take it a step further and really drive home why it's make or break in this case. Because if you don't give it specific context, it's going to go in a variety of different ways by making assumptions on that context. And it may be giving you information that's just not relevant, not accurate, and you can't use. The best professionals working with AI understand that they are fully responsible for the output quality. It's not AI's fault if it's not giving you something good. There is generally a way to work with AI better to improve its results. It's your responsibility. It can be a problem when you run into inaccurate information, but if you take that information and don't check it yourself and put it out there, that's on you. So we really want to avoid those kinds of mistakes. A single inappropriate or inaccurate AI output can really damage your reputation and destroy that trust with your community. So as you collaborate with AI, make sure that you're not putting yourself in one of these damaging situations. I'm going to be talking about a 6-pillar quality assessment framework. We'll go through these 6 pillars that you're going to be evaluating in your AI output to make sure that you're not putting something out that will damage that reputation. So you want to verify accuracy. So factual correctness, logical consistency, source validation, and currency information. Okay, so you want to evaluate relevance, specific requirement alignment, audience appropriateness, contextual fit. You want to evaluate the professional standards, tone, consistency, style alignment, organizational voice. You want to evaluate the completeness. Does it have everything that you need, or is it just some pieces that don't provide the full picture that if somebody looked at, they'd say, well, he's completely missing that point, and it damages your credibility. You want to evaluate the usability. How useful is it? Does it add anything new, or is it just regurgitate its general information that anybody could get? And then you want to evaluate the risk. So professional liability in the things that you're working with, compliance considerations, and stakeholder impact. These are really important areas that you just don't want to miss something on. And even worse, it can create a liability for you in certain regulated industries if you're using AI. and you get one of these things wrong. So again, those 6 pillars are accuracy, relevance, professional standards, completeness, usability, and risk assessment. Have this evaluation across these 6 pillars for high stakes application of AI. You want to prioritize the assessment based on the context that you're working within. You want to iterate and screen these things rapidly for basic quality assurance in time-sensitive situation. And you want to do this comprehensive review for that really high-stakes stuff that's going to be put into the world. So this framework ensures comprehensive quality evaluation, and then we're going to be looking at ways to dive deeper into this sort of evaluation to make sure that, those accuracy and relevant pieces really are explored fully. So we're going to be talking about fact-checking and verification protocols. These rigorous approaches ensure that AI content meets that professional accuracy standard. It eliminates these factual errors that can really damage your credibility. So you want to look at the sources of which AI is drawing upon. And this can be a little bit tricky because if we think back to Module 1, where we discussed how AI works, it really pulls from this massive data set of all of human knowledge that has been digitized. And if you put yourself in the place of AI, and if somebody asks you a question and you had all this information at your fingertips, you could go off in many different directions. So if you don't steer it with the prompts and the context, it's not going to be able to know exactly what you need. And it's going to give you an output that may have strayed from that path that you're really looking for. You also don't fully know what path it took to get there and what information it was trained on. If you give it a general input and regenerate 5 responses, those 5 answers will be likely very different, even if you're asking something factual. So this steering of the AI is really important. Another tricky thing is that it doesn't really tell you where the sources are. So it's trained on a lot of data and it's going to draft an answer with its model. And then it may do a web search to gather more relevant and current information to validate. You won't be able to see the sources in the training data. You will be able to see the sources it drew from that web search. This is a key piece. You need to dig into the sources it used and make sure they're reliable. It's going to cite them, and you can click on those sources and understand where it got that information, and if that's something you actually want in the output. It's a little bit tricky because it's hard to tell AI to act in a certain way with web search in particular. Right now, there's not a real way with general LLMs to select which source it's adding into it or not. You can say, use trusted sources and steer it like that, and hopefully it will grab things that have some credibility, but you can't actually check boxes on which sources it's going to use or point them to all the different sources you want. You can provide a link to a source that you want to use or multiple links, and it will go search them out, but you will have to do that work to get those links in the first place. Another key area to evaluate is logic. Ensure that conclusions follow the premise of the prompt and the context, and make sure there are no red flags in illogical combinations of ideas. We, as humans, develop this inherent logical sense of the world. AI can sometimes have difficulties doing that. So you want to look for any red flags. If something just doesn't feel right and doesn't look like it makes logical sense, don't just take what AI has given you as fact. Dig into it and understand, does the logic track? You also want to verify any actual numbers. So we call this currency checking. If you're using numbers like prices of stocks, statistical probabilities, you want to make sure that it's pulling from an accurate source and it's giving you that correct number. Especially when you're working with numbers, AI can start to get a bit off track with where it's placing certain things, and you may find certain numbers just don't match up, or it's using an outdated version of these things. So it's really important to dial in when it gives you a number or a percentage, then go and check that original source and make sure that it's accurate, because numbers are really powerful. And if we misrepresent the numbers, then we can damage our credibility. And then keep an eye out for contradictions within the responses, especially for more complex tasks. If you're giving it a really long prompt, so it gives you a long output, sometimes you can see at different points there's some contradictory information. So evaluate the whole response and make sure, that everything is consistent. So how do we go through this in a systemic way? I have this process for verification where you flag all the specific areas that you think need to be verified. So you're making note of all the different places in which you should be evaluating critically. You're cross-referencing each one of those against trusted sources and the facts that you can find online. So you're validating all of those different facts that it's basically providing. And then you're validating logical flows. So you're understanding, do these things actually connect to this logical way? Am I missing anything? And then you're confirming all the direct numbers that it's given you to make sure that everything is up to date and factual. And look, this can be a refinement process. AI can help you move through this as well. You can ask it to critically evaluate its work, identify areas that you should go and look up yourself to validate. Don't take it all on yourself. AI is going to give you something and you can start to work with that thing and refine it. So some red flags that I think are important to jump out and catch quickly are suspicious, precise statistics without attributable sources, confident assertions about contested or evolving topics, especially in emerging science or technology or industry, and then reference to events, products, or standards that don't align with industry knowledge. It may be hallucinating and making things up based on a jumble of a lot of different things. Look for oversimplified explanations of really complex topics. You don't want to miss a lot within a simple answer and just lose your credibility instantly because somebody recognizes they've not added the nuance that is needed in this area. Finally, a red flag of claims that seem to be too convenient or too perfectly aligned with your outcomes. The general persona of AI is meant to be supportive and helpful, and sometimes it gets you into trouble when it starts to just give you what you want to hear. So ask it to think critically about these things, tell me what I'm missing, tell me what I have wrong. So how can we take these prompts and apply professional editing and enhancement techniques to them? Have a systematic approach that transforms verified AI content into polished professional deliverables, that really have a high quality. So you want to start this process when you have double checked everything and you're moving on to that polish phase. And you want to take a look at what you have from AI, start to structurally optimize it. Tell it to strictly maintain the content that we've developed that is factually accurate. So that doesn't change when you're working through this process. But you can start to ask it to optimize for logical flow, argument strengthening, persuasive organization, so that what you're providing in this next step is really impactful. The next step is to go through some type of clarity enhancement. So eliminate unnecessary jargon, make sure that your concepts are clear and accessible, and just improve it for your target audience. Add the next step of professional polish. So, that grammar and spelling and style consistency and presentation quality, for that audience. And then final, but maybe the most important, is really evaluate for value that you're adding. Deepen your insights through the output that you've developed that will have some really interesting factual information, but make sure that really drives home in the output. So give examples and enhance them with this information that you've gathered. Make the information applicable. Expand on it in a way that really adds something to the conversation, not is just regurgitation of information that is easily accessible. You can work with AI to identify what the key insights are and how to make them most impactful and drive value in this process. So, what are some enhancement techniques? Replace generic examples with industry-specific scenarios that resonate with your audience. Strengthen weak arguments with additional supporting evidence or logical development. Improve transitions between ideas to create smooth and professional flow. Add specific action items, implementation guidance, and next step to really help drive that value and go take this from just an AI output to something that's actually being acted on in the world. So this editing transforms that really useful and insightful content that AI is giving you into something that really impacts the world and drives real value. This is a really key piece to getting the most out of AI. I'm going to talk about something that's really important in business, and that's professional standards and compliance integration. As we integrate AI into every aspect of our lives, we're going to really need to be aware of these sort of compliance and standards considerations. I have a framework that can ensure that that output aligns to these things. A lot of that has to do with the prompting and context, but let's dive into some of these important key points. And that's organizational alignment. So making sure that the output that AI is giving you is aligned with brand voice, the values of the business, the strategic messaging to keep it consistent across these areas. The next thing is consider the regulatory compliance. Is your brand and messaging and things made in a certain way to adhere to compliance standards for safety and responsibility? Apply these industry standards directly in the prompts in the context, these legal requirements, these professional ethics adherence, so that the AI knows how to speak, what to speak about, and what to comply to so that it's not getting you into any actual real liability. Start to think about professional ethics. There's a certain unwritten code that exists within every job. And it's actually a very hard thing for AI to understand because it's something that we don't really write about and that AI is not trained on because it's this implicit, unspoken understanding of how we just operate in a sort of context in our society. Think about these things that are really important to how you behave in your work and how you form your own sort of output in your work to adhere to these professional sort of ethics. So, responsibility for accuracy, intellectual property respect, reputation, how you speak to people above you in your organizational structure or below you. These are really important pieces so that AI can align its response to exactly what you need. So how can we put this into a process? I want you to review the content against the organizational brand, messaging, make sure it's consistent, evaluate the compliance, make sure there's nothing that stands out to you that is not adhering to compliance standards, and then really give it this audit on ethical practice and make sure that it's understanding what it needs to understand within your role. So I have a bit of a checklist to go through. Does this content represent organizational voice accurately? Are the claims supported by organizational knowledge and capabilities? Does it align with these compliance standards? And would your senior leadership or your customers approve of this content representing your company? These standards are integral to ensuring AI can really give you a useful output. So give some real consideration and critical thinking into this step so that you're making something that, you know, is useful. On a continuation of this, I want you to really think about where you're applying AI into your life and what are the risks and what are the liabilities of using this powerful tool. For something as simple as asking for some general information that you may just need while you're having a conversation with somebody, when you start to get into these heavily regulated industries, the things that you're putting out can really affect people's lives in a positive or negative way. For example, I'm thinking about healthcare. Some of the output that AI is integrated into for these industries can directly impact patient outcome. So you need to be very mindful about how you're creating these things so that you're improving outcomes and not harming people. If you think about it from a psychological standpoint, people are using AI as a therapist. So you need to first apply the disclaimers that this is not a medical professional. The output that is here is not for medical needs. Always consult a professional who's accredited in this area so that you can get professional advice, or just making sure that it's compliant to specific areas of medical compliance standards that exist. And there are some pretty harsh regulations if you don't adhere to those. So be very mindful that your AI output is aligning. Make sure that the accuracy is there because you can open yourself up to accuracy liability if things are not represented well. Make sure that it aligns with your representation of your business. You don't want, from a business standpoint, your content to be all over the place. The marketing team will have a very specific way that they want to represent the business. And if you're a representation of that business and you're not acting in that way, it can create some problems across departments and create some issues there. You want to make sure that stakeholder impact is considered, that relationship and trust between your customers. There can be a real risk of damaging your reputation with stakeholders. And then from a personal point, like your reputation, so long-term career and business implications of using AI in your work, can be really important because you need to be transparent about your AI use. You need to be aware of some stigmas that exist with AI of maybe cheapening your work. These things can really make a difference when you're thinking about this long-term view of your business and, just who you are and how you work with AI. So how can you mitigate some of these risks? So clearly distinguish AI-assisted and human-validated content in your professional applications. Be transparent. Maintain verification documentation for critical claims of professional recommendations or factual information. Establish approval processes for content representing organizational positions or professional expertise. And then build these feedback loops in so that you can identify quality issues before they kind of go out into the wild. So you really need this systemic risk assessment to protect your reputation and your business's reputation and your relationships by identifying these issues and addressing them before you put them out into the world. I know that AI can be incredibly empowering and you just feel like you capture that magic and then you just put it out. But you really need to take this approach after AI has given you something useful to make sure it's not going to get you into trouble. And it can be difficult because AI is so powerful. It'll give you something so quickly. You just want to take advantage of that productivity that you've unlocked. But I promise in the end, be doing less work when you're going through some of this effort to audit, the output and manage that output and put it out than you will if you had to do this all on your own. So just trust in that process that it's a necessary step to make sure the output aligns with what you need before you put it into the world. Because I promise you, just one incident where your reputation is damaged will make you regret not implementing this into your AI workflows. So how do you build this quality system for yourself? You really want to make assessment templates, standardize evaluation criteria for different professional content, and build yet another database of all of these things that we've been talking about so you can draw on those and use them in the future. Have some verification protocols. So based on specific use cases, have specific fact-checking processes for industry-specific claims and standards. Make sure you're not missing things through this verification process. And then apply some enhancement workflows to the output so that you get this consistent editing that creates consistent results over a longer interaction with AI. And then finally, you really need some risk assessment procedures. Identify the risks of each AI application and if you can mitigate those risks or if it's worth not using AI at all. So I want to talk a little bit about how you can implement this plan into your life and profession so that you can really get this quality and actually use it by putting it into the world. So start to really master these 6 pillar system and then, progress into using these things in your work and start building these templates out in more low stakes environments and use cases, and then start to refine and build them into more impactful ways when they get to the standards you need and really address those compliance standards. You need to get it to a place that's almost perfect before you can really apply it into those really high impact and high risk cases and really do some soul searching to understand if it is actually something you should apply AI into or if you should still completely do it manually because it's that important. So I really want to empower you to apply this. So let's build this list of AI applications that you can start to apply this process to and experiment and build progressively into those really key pieces of your life. So I hope you learned something today about how to manage AI output. It's a really key piece to elevating AI from just this helpful collaborator to really something that takes an important place in your business and in your workflows. So really keep this in mind and be careful with what you're doing with AI. It is powerful, but if you use it in the wrong way, you can find yourself in some trouble and damage relationships and trust. Let me know how you're managing AI output. I want to hear how you're addressing some of these risks, what your process is when you're working with AI. And yeah, take a look at the links in the description for more about myself, access to the physical book version of these guides to help you integrate AI into your personal and professional lives. And join the community, stay engaged. I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Thanks.